Hi, I'm Sok, and I've decided to start recording my thoughts on my progress of my game, at the very least for internal reference. I was inspired by the recent GMTK Game Jam, which I missed out on, but I got this idea for a game where you are racing down a track, but you do not control the speed of your ship. The track slows and speeds you up as you go along. For now, I only have generating an infinite track implemented, and getting the ship to move along this track with a little bit of drifting physics. And for the now, I control the speed of the ship. And the ship does slow down during turning, which is kind of interesting because it means that if the track forces the ship to go too fast, the player might do a bit of zigzagging to slow down. Right now the track is mono width, and I've been thinking a bit about how I want to change that to make the track a little bit less monotonous. Difficulty can be modulated by changing the width of the track, as well as the sharpness of the turns, and the speed, of course. Though as the ship moves faster, it can do sharper turns less easily. At the same time, sharp turns can be done with the right amount of oversteer, but they can't be done consistently. And the track is probably a bit thin right now, even for some of the higher difficulty spikes. Still, the core mechanic works right now, and it feels okay. One of the problems that I noticed is that if the ship is moving too fast, it can become difficult to figure out what the heading is if you rotate too much, and then you find the ship is off from what you expected. The ship could become thinner so that it is a little bit longer than it is wide. And right now it's about as wide as it is long. I've also thought about changing the coloring of the ship. Just to give it more, make it more obvious what the forward direction is. But it does seem that when you're very zoomed out, it's very difficult to see the ship, and maybe the pattern on the ship is a bit ornate. Unnecessarily so. Back on track generation, one of the things that I also find very boring about this track generation is that it's all based on moving around a circle. So the angle of each plank in the road, proportionate to the last, is always the same. And I was looking at Bezier curves, and they look really neat. I thought it would be harder to implement at first, so I started with what I'm calling circular curves. But that might be where I go next for track generation. And the other thing is to figure out ways of making it more obvious the heading of the ship. For example, perhaps particles shooting out the back of the ship that represent the thrusters. the more force the thrusters are applying, the more particles and the intensity of those particles. So that could be one way. It might not be entirely great, so the other idea I had was a tail on the ship. And the mostly the only part I'm stuck there is I'm not sure what the best practice is in OpenGL for generating that. Whether I calculate all the points on the CPU, well, obviously I would keep track of the position of the ship at every frame and have a list of points to draw the tail at, and then stick that into a vertex buffer or try to do it all within the shading language. I'm not sure what the best way is. Maybe I could just try one, see if it works and stick with it, or try both. Two other things that this definitely needs is sound and music. For sound, I'm not really sure what feeling I want to go for here. SFX, SFRX or SFXR, I think, is this tool that I used, God, 8 years ago. And it looks like people are still using it today, but I don't think that 8-bit sounds really are going to work here all that well. This still could be good. Anything's better than nothing. And I'm not a sound designer. Another thing I have to start thinking about is different types of tracks. So, for example, there will be tracks that speed you up, tracks that slow you down, but also I might like to implement like a track that you sort of bounce off of, or a track that you refract through. Track that forces you to turn, probably not, because that might be a bit annoying. But various things like that could be interesting. So those are my thoughts for now.